The message came through at 3 in the morning, ship time. Captain Daniel Morrison was already awake, sitting alone in his quarters aboard the Times, Horizon's light asterisk. Reading old mission reports, he could not sleep. Something in the stars felt wrong tonight, though he could not explain why. When the alarm sounded, he was on the bridge in less than 2 minutes. His communications officer, Katie Lawson, looked up at him with wide eyes. Her face was pale in the blue light of her console. "Sir, you need to hear this," she said. The recording was old and broken. Static filled most of it. But through the noise, Daniel heard words that made his heart go cold. The voice was not human. It clicked and hummed in patterns that the universal translator struggled to convert, but the meaning was clear enough. "This is the Valanthi High Council. Our sun is dying. We have asked the Galactic Concord for help. They have refused us. We have nowhere to go. If anyone hears this message, please, we have 800 million souls. Our children are afraid. Please." The bridge was silent. Daniel stood very still. Around him, his crew had stopped moving. Every human on that ship knew what the word Valanthi meant. Every human alive knew the story. 60 years ago, humanity had sent its first colony ship beyond the solar system. The Times Horizon's Edge Times carried 12,000 people through the darkness between stars. They were farmers and engineers, teachers and doctors, dreamers who wanted to build a new world. And then, 4 years into their journey, the main engine exploded. The ship drifted, broken and dying. There was not enough food, not enough air, not enough power to send a message that anyone would hear. The colonists prepared to die. Parents held their children and told them stories to keep them calm. Old men and women made peace with the end. There was nothing else to do. Then something appeared on the sensors. It was an alien ship. The first aliens humanity had ever seen. They were called the Valanthi, and they looked like nothing humans had imagined. Their bodies were covered in hard shells. They had too many legs and eyes that glowed soft green in the dark. They should have been frightening. They should have been monsters from a nightmare. Instead, they were saviors. The Valanthi ship was damaged too. They were running low on supplies. They had their own problems, their own mission, their own families waiting for them back home. They had every reason to fly past the broken human ship and continue on their way. No one would have blamed them. No one would have even known. But they stopped. For 3 months, the Valanthi shared everything they had. They gave the humans food from their own stores. They gave them medicine that had to be modified for human bodies. They gave them fuel and parts and technical knowledge. Their engineers worked alongside human engineers to repair the Times Horizon's Edge asterisk. Their doctors learned human biology in weeks so they could treat the sick and injured. When the human ship was finally ready to move again, the Valanthi towed it to the nearest habitable system. They stayed until they were sure the colonists were safe. And then, before they left, their ambassador came aboard the Times Horizon's Edge Times to say goodbye. Her name was Keth Sora. She was old even then. Her shell faded to soft gray. Her movements slow and careful. The human captain asked her why. Why had they done this? Why had they given so much to strangers? They had nothing to offer in return. Humanity was young and weak and had nothing the Valanthi needed. Keth Sora had looked at him with those glowing green eyes and said something that every human child now learned in school. All who travel the stars are kin. You were lost and alone. We could not leave you. That is not who we are. And then she was gone. Daniel Morrison had grown up with that story. His grandmother had been on the Times Horizon's Edge asterisk. She had been 6 years old when the Valanthi came. She used to tell him about the aliens who had saved her life. She described how scared she had been at first, how strange they looked, and how quickly that fear had turned to love. The Valanthi who cared for her had let her ride on his back. He had made her laugh with tricks and games. He had given her his own food when supplies ran short. They saved us, his grandmother used to say. Never forget that, Daniel. They saved us when no one else could, when no one else would. He had not forgotten. Katie, he said quietly. When was this message sent? 3 days ago, sir. It has been repeating on all frequencies since then. Has anyone responded? Katie checked her console. Her hands were shaking. No, sir. The Galactic Concord officially declared the Valanthy homeworld a quarantine zone. No ships are allowed in or out. They say the radiation from the dying sun is too dangerous. That is not why they are doing this. No, sir, I know. Daniel knew too. He had learned a lot about galactic politics in his years of service. The Concord was ruled by species who thought only of profit and power. The Valanthy were not wealthy. They were not powerful. They had no great fleets, no valuable resources, no strategic importance. In the eyes of the Concord, they were useless. And useless species were not worth saving. Daniel walked to the front of the bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 800 million Valanthy were watching their son die. Somewhere out there, the descendants of those who had saved his grandmother were afraid and alone and calling out for help that would not come. He turned to face his crew. How many of you know the story of the Times Horizon's Edge asterisk? Every hand went up. Then you know what we have to do. He took a deep breath. Set a course for the Valanthy homeworld. Maximum speed. Katie stared at him. Sir, the Concord has forbidden any contact. If we go there, we will be breaking galactic law. I know. They could strip you of your rank. They could arrest the entire crew. I know. Daniel sat down in his captain's chair. Katie, get me a direct line to Earth Command. I need to speak with Admiral Bennett, and then I need to speak with the President. He paused. Tell them that humanity has a debt to repay, and we are going to repay it. The bridge erupted into motion. Officers ran to their stations. The engines hummed as they powered up. The Times Horizon's light times turned toward a distant star that was dying, toward a world that was running out of time. Daniel Morrison watched the stars blur as his ship jumped to faster than light speed. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. They saved us when no one else could. When no one else would. Now it was humanity's turn. President Marcus Cole stood at the podium and looked out at the faces before him. The United Nations Emergency Assembly had gathered in less than 6 hours. Leaders from every nation on Earth sat in the Great Hall, along with representatives from the Mars colonies, the Belt Stations, and the Outer Moon settlements. It was the largest gathering of human leaders in 50 years. Marcus had not slept. His eyes were tired and his voice was rough, but his words were clear. 60 years ago, he began, humanity almost died in the darkness between stars. We sent our first colonists into the void, and they were lost. Their ship was broken. Their supplies were gone. They had no hope. He paused. And then strangers came. Aliens we had never met. Beings who owed us nothing. They could have passed by. They could have left us to die, but they did not. The hall was silent. Everyone knew this story. Everyone had heard it 1,000 times. The Valanthy saved 12,000 human lives. They shared their food when they did not have enough for themselves. They fixed our ship when they could have saved their parts for their own journey. They asked for nothing in return. Nothing. Marcus gripped the podium. Their ambassador told us that all who travel, the stars are kin. She told us that they could not leave us. That was not who they were. He looked around the room. Now they are dying. Their sun is failing. 800 million Valanthy are trapped on their homeworld with nowhere to go. The Galactic Concord has turned them away. The great powers of the galaxy have looked at them and decided they are not worth saving. His voice grew harder. I refuse to accept that. We are humans. We remember what was done for us. We remember kindness. And we repay our debts. The vote was not even close. Every single nation voted yes. Every colony. Every station. Humanity would save the Valanthy. All 800 million of them. Admiral Laura Bennett was placed in charge of the operation. She was a tall woman with gray hair and steady hands. She had fought in 3 wars and commanded fleets across a dozen star systems. But this was different. This was not a battle. This was a rescue on a scale no species had ever attempted. She called her staff together within an hour of the vote. We have 11 months, she told them. The Volanthi sun will become too unstable after that. Radiation will make the planet uninhabitable. We need to move 800 million people in 11 months. Her logistics officer, a young man named Kyle Patterson, ran the numbers. His face went pale. Admiral, that is impossible. We do not have enough ships. We do not have enough room. We do not have enough food. Then we make it possible. Laura pointed at a star map. Here is what we are going to do. Every transport ship in the human fleet will be redirected to the Volanthi homeworld. Every cargo vessel, every passenger liner. If it can carry people, it goes. What about supplies? The colonies depend on regular shipments. We ration. We share. We make do with less. She looked around the room. Mars Industrial Consortium will double their food production. The Belt Mining Federation will convert cargo haulers into transport ships. The moon stations will process extra water and oxygen. Everyone gives. Everyone sacrifices. Kyle hesitated. Admiral, the people will not accept this. Rations? Shared housing? They will protest. Laura smiled. It was a thin, tired smile. No, they will not. You do not understand. Kyle, this is not about politics. This is not about economics. This is about who we are. Humans remember. And when humans remember a debt, they pay it. She was right. Within a week, volunteers flooded the recruitment centers. Pilots, who had retired years ago, came back to fly transports. Engineers gave up comfortable jobs to work on conversion projects. Doctors signed up to travel to the Volanthi homeworld, even knowing the radiation danger. Ordinary families cleared extra rooms and signed papers saying they would house refugees. The response was not limited to Earth. Mars colonists, who lived in domes and struggled with harsh conditions every day, voted to expand their cities. They would double their population to make room for the Volanthi. Titan refineries worked triple shifts to produce extra fuel. The Belt families, who already lived in cramped quarters on cold asteroids, agreed to share their space. On the Volanthi homeworld, the news spread slowly. Their communications systems were damaged. Their power grids were failing. Many did not believe it at first. They had been abandoned by the galaxy. Why would the young species called humans be any different? Keth Sora heard the news in her small home near the old spaceport. She was very old now. Her shell was cracked in places, and she moved with great difficulty. But her mind was still sharp, and when she heard what the humans were doing, she wept. Her aide, a young Volanthi named Tirith, did not understand. Ambassador, why do you cry? Is this not good news? Keth Sora looked at him with her faded green eyes. It is the best news I have ever heard, she said. I am crying because I never expected anyone to come. But you saved them. 60 years ago, you saved their colony ship. Yes, and I asked for nothing in return. I expected nothing in return. That is what kindness means. Tirith, you do not give expecting to receive. She laughed softly, her voice clicking and humming. But humans are strange creatures. They remember everything. And they repay debts that were never debts at all. Far away, in the halls of the Galactic Concord, Ambassador Zethrak of the Dominion Hegemony watched the human news feeds with growing confusion. He was a tall being with silver skin and cold black eyes. His species had ruled the Concord for 1,000 years. They understood power, they understood profit, they understood fear. They did not understand this. He sent a formal message to Earth. Why are you doing this? The Volanthi have nothing to offer you. They cannot pay you. They cannot fight for you. They are weak and poor and dying. What do you gain? The human response came from diplomat Ryan Carter, a man with a calm voice and patient eyes. They helped us when we were nothing. We do not forget. Zethrak read the message 3 times. It made no sense. In 1,000 years of galactic politics, no one had ever done something like this. Species helped each other for advantage, for power, For money. No one helped simply because they remembered being helped. He filed the message away and continued watching. He did not understand the humans, but he was beginning to realize that this was dangerous. Not because they were aggressive, not because they were strong, but because they were different. And different things could change the galaxy in ways no one could predict. Back on Earth, Admiral Laura Bennett looked at the growing list of volunteers. Millions of names. Millions of people who wanted to help. She thought about her father, who had served on a ship that once visited the Valanthe homeworld. He had told her stories about them. Gentle creatures. He had called them kind, honorable. She picked up her communicator and called Captain Daniel Morrison, who was already halfway to the Valanthe system. Daniel, we are coming. Tell them to hold on. Tell them humanity remembers. Tell them we are bringing everyone home. The captain's voice crackled through the static. Understood, Admiral. I will tell them. And somewhere in the darkness of space, 1,000 human ships began their journey toward a dying world. The first human ships arrived at the Valanthe homeworld on a day that should have been dark with despair. The dying sun hung in the sky, bloated and red, throwing strange shadows across the land. Radiation alarms had been screaming for weeks. The air smelled of burning metal and fear. And then the sky filled with ships. Lieutenant Commander Sam Griffin was among the first to land. He brought his transport down in the central plaza of the largest Valanthe city, a place of ancient towers and crumbling beauty. When he opened the doors and stepped outside, thousands of Valanthe were waiting. They stood in silence, their green eyes glowing in the dim red light, their shells trembling. Sam did not know what to say. He had prepared speeches in his head during the long journey. He had practiced words of comfort and hope, but standing there, looking at the faces of beings who had given up all hope, he forgot everything. He simply said, "We are here. We came to take you home." A sound rose from the crowd. It was not quite crying, not quite singing. It was a sound that Sam had never heard before, a vibration that seemed to come from deep within the Valanthe shells. Later, he learned it was their expression of joy so profound it could not be contained. The evacuation began immediately. Human engineers worked alongside Valanthe technicians to repair the failing spaceports. Power grids were stabilized. Landing zones were cleared. Medical stations were set up in every district. The humans brought food and water and medicine. They brought radiation suits and protective gear. They brought hope, but the work was hard, and time was running out. Sam Griffin became famous for his tirelessness. He flew his transport, the Times Bright Dawn Asterisk, 16 hours a day, ferrying refugees to the waiting ships in orbit. He ate when he could. He slept when he had to. He lost 15 pounds in the first month and did not notice. One night, during a brief rest period, a young Valanthe approached him. The creature was small, clearly a child, with a shell that had not yet hardened to adult gray. "Why are you doing this?" the child asked. Sam looked at her. "Because your people helped us once. A long time ago. I was not alive then. I know. But we remember. Humans remember." He knelt down to look at her directly. "What is your name?" "Vareth. Vareth, I want you to remember this day. When you are old, I want you to tell your children about it. Tell them that strangers came from across the stars to help you. Tell them that kindness travels. It never stops." Vareth looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out with one of her small legs and touched his hand. In Valanthe culture, this was the deepest sign of trust. Sam smiled. "Come on. Let us get you on a ship." Not all the stories were happy. The radiation from the dying sun grew worse as the months passed. Human doctors worked around the clock treating Valanthe who had been exposed. Many could be saved. Some could not. Human nurses held the hands of dying Valanthe and sang to them, even though the aliens could not understand the words. Lieutenant Maya Collins was stationed at a medical facility in the southern continent. She had trained as a surgeon, but there was little surgery could do against radiation poisoning. Most of her work was comfort care. She held the dying. She cleaned their shells. She told them they were not alone. One old Valanthy asked her, "Are you afraid to touch us? We are dying. We are contaminated." Maya shook her head. "You are people. People deserve to be held." The old Valanthy made the joy sound, even as his life faded. "Strange creatures," he whispered. "Beautiful, strange creatures." As the evacuation continued, the worst incident came in the 8th month. Sam Griffin was loading refugees onto his transport when alarms screamed across the spaceport. A massive solar flare was incoming. The orbital station above them, where thousands of Valanthy were waiting for transport to human space, was directly in the path of the radiation wave. The station had shields, but they were old and damaged. They would not hold. Sam did not hesitate. He flew the bright dawn times up through the burning sky, pushing his engines beyond safety limits. He reached the station just as the flare hit. He positioned his ship between the station and the radiation, using his own hull as a shield. The bright dawn times was not designed for this. Warning lights flashed. Hull breaches opened. The temperature inside the ship rose to dangerous levels. Sam stayed at the controls, keeping his ship in position, protecting the station behind him. When the flare passed, the bright dawn times was dying. Sam managed to dock with the station, but his ship would never fly again. He had lost everything. He climbed out of his burning vessel and stood on the station deck, surrounded by the Valanthy he had saved. His uniform was scorched, his hands were burned, but he was smiling. A Valanthy shuttle pilot named Koreth came to him. "You destroyed your ship for us." "It was just a ship. It was your life, your career, your future." Sam shrugged. "There were children on this station. I saw them in the window as I flew up. Valanthy children, watching the flare come. How could I not help them?" Koreth was silent for a long moment. Then he made a formal bow, bending his many legs in a gesture of deepest respect. "I will remember you, Sam Griffin. My children will know your name." Back on Earth and Mars and Titan and the Belt, the refugees began to arrive. Human families opened their homes to the Valanthy. It was not always easy. The aliens had different needs. They ate different food. They slept in different positions. Their shells clicked and hummed at night, keeping some human hosts awake, but people adjusted. They learned. A 12-year-old girl named Megan Pierce had a Valanthy family staying in her home. The youngest was a child named Tirith, the same young male who had served as aide to Ambassador Keth Sora. He was overwhelmed by everything: the noise, the crowds, the strange human customs. One day, Megan found him hiding in a closet, his shell pulled tight around him, his eyes dim with fear. "What is wrong?" she asked. "I do not belong here. This is not my world. I am afraid." Megan sat down next to him. She did not try to touch him. She had learned that Valanthy needed to offer touch first. "Can I tell you a story?" Tirith clicked his agreement. "A long time ago, my great-great-grandmother was on a ship called the Times Horizon's Edge **. She was 6 years old. Her ship was broken, and everyone thought they were going to die. And then the Valanthy came." Megan pulled out her tablet and showed him an old picture, the famous image of the two ships joined together in the darkness. "Your people saved her. They could have left her to die, but they did not." Tirith looked at the picture. "I have seen this image. It is taught in our schools. It is taught in ours too." Megan smiled. "You belong here, Tirith. You belong here because your people made us family a long time ago. And family takes care of each other." Tirith's eyes grew brighter. He reached out and touched Megan's hand, just as little Vareth had touched Sam Griffin's hand months before. "Thank you," he said. "I will remember this." In orbit above Earth, the great transport ships continued to arrive. 800 million Valanthy, saved from a dying world. The largest migration in the history of the galaxy. Admiral Laura Bennett watched from her command center as the last transport entered Earth space. 11 months of work, thousands of ships, millions of volunteers, countless acts of sacrifice and kindness. They had done it. She thought of Sam Griffin, who had given up his ship, She thought of Maya Collins, who had held the dying. She thought of Megan Pierce, who had comforted a frightened child. "This is who we are," she said quietly to herself. "This is what humans do." And far away, on a world that was now empty and burning, the Valanthi sun finally collapsed. But it did not matter. The Valanthi were safe. They were home. The news of the Valanthi evacuation spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. 1,000 worlds heard the story. 1,000,000 species talked about what the humans had done. And in the great halls of the Galactic Concord, the most powerful beings in the known universe grew nervous. Ambassador Zethrak of the Dominion hegemony had watched the entire operation with growing unease. His species had ruled the Concord for 1,000 years. They understood how the galaxy worked. Power came from strength. Wealth came from exploitation. Alliances came from mutual benefit. These were the laws of civilization, as fixed as the movements of the stars, and the humans had broken them. He called a private meeting with diplomat Ryan Carter in a small room on the neutral station of Corvex Prime. The chamber was cold and gray, designed to make both species uncomfortable. This was traditional for difficult conversations. "I must understand," Zethrak said. His voice was calm, but his silver skin flickered with colors that revealed his true feelings. "You have spent enormous resources. You have disrupted your economy. You have taken in 800 million refugees who cannot work, who cannot pay, who cannot fight for you. Why?" Ryan Carter sat with his hands folded in his lap. He was an average-looking man, with brown hair and patient eyes. Nothing about him seemed special, and yet he represented a species that had just done the impossible. "They helped us," Ryan said. 60 years ago, we were dying, and they saved us. That was 60 years ago. None of the humans who were saved are in positions of power now. Most are dead. The debt, if it ever existed, was owed by people who are no longer alive. Humans do not think that way. Zethrak leaned forward. "Explain." Ryan thought for a moment. "In your culture, a debt is a personal thing. One individual owes another. When the individual dies, the debt dies with them." "Yes, of course. How else could it be? For humans, a debt can belong to everyone. The Valanthi did not just save 12,000 colonists. They saved the hope of our species. They proved that the universe was not cold and empty. They showed us that kindness existed beyond our small world. That changed us. That changed all of us. Forever." Zethrak was silent. "When a Valanthi ship saved the Time's Horizon's Edge asterisk," Ryan continued, "they saved every human who would ever be born. Every child who grew up hearing that story. Every person who looked at the stars and believed that good beings lived among them. The Valanthi gave us something we could never repay. And so we keep trying. This is irrational. Maybe. But it is who we are." Zethrak stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. "You have created a problem, Diplomat Carter. A serious problem. I know. The Concord is built on certain assumptions. Species act in their own interest. Alliances form and break based on profit. The weak are abandoned because helping them has no benefit." He turned to face Ryan. "You have shown the galaxy that another way is possible. Other species are asking questions now. They are wondering why we left the Valanthi to die. They are wondering what else we have let die." Ryan nodded slowly. "Good. Good." Zethrak's skin flared bright red. "You understand what you are doing? You are destabilizing a system that has maintained peace for 1,000 years. Has it maintained peace? Or has it just maintained the power of those at the top?" Ryan stood up. "Ambassador, I am not trying to start a war. But I am not going to apologize for saving 800 million lives. If that makes other species question the way things have always been done, then maybe the way things have always been done was wrong." Zethrak had no response. Within a year, 3 more species approached Earth. The Morvathi were a small, shy race who lived on a single colony world. Raiders had destroyed their homeworld decades ago. They had begged the Concord for help, for protection, for a new place to live. The Concord had refused. The Morvathi had nothing to offer, so the Concord let them suffer. They came to Earth with a simple request: medicine. Their people were dying of a plague that could be cured with basic human antibiotics. Would humanity help? The answer was yes before they finished asking. Human medical ships arrived at the Morvathi colony within 3 weeks. Doctors and nurses treated the sick. Scientists studied the plague and developed better treatments. Engineers helped repair the colony's damaged infrastructure. When the crisis was over, humanity did not leave. They built a permanent medical station and staffed it with volunteers. The Morvathi ambassador wept during the dedication ceremony. "We asked for medicine," she said. "You gave us hope." The Quelith were next. They were a dying race, only 50,000 individuals left in the entire galaxy. Their biology was failing. They could no longer reproduce. In another generation, they would be gone forever. They did not ask for much. Just a place to live out their final years. Somewhere peaceful. Somewhere they would be remembered. Humanity gave them an entire moon. A beautiful place with gentle gravity and warm sunlight. Human architects built comfortable homes that suited Quelith needs. Human historians began recording Quelith stories and art and music, preserving everything for the ages. Human children visited and learned about the Quelith way of life. "We will not forget you," President Marcus Cole told the Quelith elder. "When the last of your people is gone, we will still remember. We will teach our children about you. We will keep your memory alive." The elder, a frail creature with translucent skin and ancient eyes, took the president's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for letting us matter." The Dominion hegemony watched all of this with growing alarm. They called an emergency session of the Galactic Concord. Representatives from 200 species gathered in the Great Chamber on Corvex Prime. Admiral Laura Bennett attended as Earth's representative. She wore her full dress uniform, decorated with medals from 3 wars. Her gray hair was pulled back tight. Her eyes were calm and steady. The hegemony's accusations were sharp. Earth has violated 17 treaties. They have interfered with quarantine zones. They have destabilized economic arrangements. They have upset the natural order of galactic civilization. Laura listened to the charges without expression. When they finished, she stood to speak. "May I show you something?" she asked. Without waiting for permission, she activated a holographic display. Images filled the chamber. A human nurse holding a dying Valanthi. A human doctor treating a Morvathi child. A human teacher sitting with Quelith elders, recording their stories. "This is what we have done," Laura said. "We have saved lives. We have eased suffering. We have given hope to those who had none." She turned to face the assembled ambassadors. "You call this a violation. You call this destabilization. I call it basic decency." Zethrak rose to his feet. "You are disrupting a system that has maintained stability for 1,000 years. Your stability was built on abandonment. Your peace was purchased with suffering. You let entire species die because they could not pay for the privilege of living." Laura's voice grew hard. "That is not stability. That is cruelty dressed up in fancy words." The chamber erupted in noise. Some species shouted in anger. Others clicked and hummed in distress. A few simply watched in silence, their eyes thoughtful. Laura waited for the noise to die down. Then she spoke again, her voice quiet but clear. "We are not asking you to change. We are not threatening war. We are simply telling you how we will live. Humans remember kindness. Humans repay debts. And humans do not abandon people just because it is inconvenient." She paused. "If that changes the galaxy, then maybe the galaxy needed to change." She sat down. The chamber was silent for a long time. Finally, a small voice spoke from the back of the room. It was the Morvathi ambassador, the shy creature whose people had nearly died from plague. "Earth does not stand alone in this," she said. "The Morvathi stand with them." Another voice joined in. "The Quelith representative. The Quelith stand with them." And then another, and another. By the end of the session, 12 species had pledged to support humanity's new way of thinking. 12 species who had been abandoned by the Concord. 12 species who had received human kindness when they expected none. As Laura Bennett left the chamber, Zethrak stopped her in the corridor. "You have started something you cannot control," he said. Laura looked at him steadily. "Maybe, but at least I can look in a mirror and not be ashamed of what I see." She walked away, leaving the Dominion ambassador alone with his thoughts. Outside, the stars continued to burn. But something had shifted. Something had changed. And the galaxy would never be quite the same. 5 years had passed since the Great Evacuation. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Valanthi had become part of human civilization. They worked on human ships and in human factories. They taught in human schools and served in human governments. Their clicking, humming language was now heard on every human world, mixing with English and Mandarin and Spanish and 100 other tongues. They were no longer refugees. They were family. Ambassador Keth Sora lived in a small house on Earth, near the old United Nations building in New York. She was very old now, her shell faded to pale white. Her movements slow and careful, but her mind was still sharp, and her eyes still glowed with the soft green light of her people. On this particular morning, she was being prepared for a ceremony. Human nurses helped her into a special harness that would support her aging body. Valanthi attendants polished her shell until it gleamed. Outside, crowds had gathered, waiting to see her. "Are you nervous?" asked one of the nurses, a young woman named Beth. Keth Sora made the sound that humans had learned meant amusement. "I am 140 years old. I have outlived my homeworld. Nothing makes me nervous anymore." But she was nervous, just a little. Today she would become the first non-human in history to receive the Terran Medal of Honor, the highest award humanity could give. The ceremony was held in the Great Plaza before the United Nations. Billions watched on screens across 1,000 worlds. President Marcus Cole, now in his second term, stood at the podium and called Keth Sora forward. She moved slowly, her many legs clicking against the stone floor. The crowd was silent. And then, as she approached the stage, they began to applaud. The sound grew and grew until it was like thunder, like the roar of a great wave crashing against the shore. Keth Sora stopped and looked out at the sea of faces, humans and Valanthi, standing side by side. Many were weeping. Many were cheering. All were united in this moment of gratitude. President Cole helped her onto the stage and placed the medal around her neck. It was a simple thing. A golden star with a blue ribbon. But it represented something far greater than its small size. 65 years ago, the president said, you made a choice. You saw strangers in distress, and you helped them. You asked for nothing. You expected nothing. You simply did what was right. He paused. That choice changed everything. It changed humanity. It changed the galaxy. And today, we honor you for it. Keth Sora's voice was old and weak, but the microphones carried it across the plaza and across the worlds. I did not save you for a medal, she said. I saved you because that is what good people do. And I have learned something all these years later. Something wonderful. She looked at the crowd, at the mixed faces of two species who had become one family. I have learned that kindness travels. You pass it on, you spread it, you share it with those you meet. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, it comes back to you in ways you never expected. Her eyes glowed brighter. I gave you help when you needed it. You gave me a home when I had none. This is the way of good people. This is the way of family. The applause that followed shook the buildings. Far from Earth, Admiral Daniel Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship. The ship was called Times Keth Sora's Gift *, and it was a masterpiece. Human engineers and Valanthi technicians had designed it together, combining the best of both species. It was fast and strong and beautiful, a symbol of what two peoples could accomplish when they worked as one. Beside Daniel stood Lieutenant Tirith. The young Valanthi, who had once hidden in a closet, frightened and alone, was now an officer in the United Fleet, the first of his kind to earn the rank. His shell gleamed with new adulthood, and his eyes burned with purpose. "Do you remember?" Tirith asked. "When I was afraid? When I thought I did not belong?" Daniel smiled. "I remember. You were hiding in Megan Pierce's closet. She told me a story about the times Horizon's Edge asterisk. She told me we were family." Tirith looked out at the stars. "I did not believe her then. I thought she was just being kind." "Huh. And now? Now I understand. Family is not just about blood. It is about choice. You chose to save us. We chose to stay with you. That makes us family in a way that biology never could." Daniel nodded. "The hegemony still does not understand. They think we are foolish. Sentimental. Let them think what they want. We know the truth." The truth was spreading across the galaxy. The compact of remembrance had grown from 12 species to 40. These were not military allies in the traditional sense. They did not sign treaties based on fear or greed. They signed them based on a simple promise. We will help each other. We will remember kindness. We will not abandon those in need. The Dominion hegemony called it naive. They predicted it would collapse within a decade. They were wrong. Every year, the compact grew stronger. Species that had been ignored by the Concord found shelter within its embrace. Refugees were welcomed. Resources were shared. Knowledge flowed freely between worlds that had never spoken before. And at the center of it all were the humans. The strange species that remembered. The odd creatures who repaid debts that were never asked for. Ambassador Zethrak, who had questioned Ryan Carter all those years ago, finally requested a private meeting with the human diplomat. They met on the same neutral station where they had first spoken. In the same cold gray room. "I think I understand now," Zethrak said. "At least a little." Ryan waited. "You do not help others to gain advantage. You help them because it is right. And by doing so, you gain something far more valuable than power or wealth. You gain loyalty, true loyalty, freely given." Zethrak's silver skin flickered with colors that Ryan had learned meant reluctant respect. "It is a strange strategy, but I cannot deny its effectiveness." "It is not a strategy," Ryan said. "It is just who we are." "Yes, I know." Zethrak stood. "My government will never officially join your compact. We have too much pride for that. But I wanted you to know that some of us see what you have built. Some of us wonder if we chose the wrong path. 1,000 years ago." He left without another word. Back on the Times Keth Sora's gift asterisk, Admiral Morrison received a message from Earth Command. A new crisis had emerged on the far side of the galaxy. A species called the Thanari were facing extinction from a disease they could not cure. They had sent desperate pleas to the Concord. The Concord had ignored them. Daniel looked at the star map. The Thanari homeworld was far away. The journey would be long and dangerous. The cost would be enormous. Tirith stood beside him. "What do we do?" Daniel smiled. It was the same smile he had worn when he first received the Valanthi distress call, all those years ago. The smile of a man who knew exactly who he was and what he stood for. "We go," he said. "We help. That is what we do." The crew did not question. They did not complain. Humans and Valanthi worked side by side, preparing the ship for the long journey ahead. They had learned well the lesson that had shaped their civilization. Kindness was not weakness. Memory was not sentimentality. And gratitude, real gratitude, could shake worlds. The ship jumped to faster than light speed, carrying with it the hope of another dying species. Behind them, the stars burned on, witnesses to a new age in the history of the galaxy, an age built not on power or fear, but on a simple truth that humans had always known. We remember those who help us. We remember forever, and we never, ever stop paying it forward. On Earth, in her small house near the United Nations, Keth Sora watched the news of the times Keth Sora's gift times departing on its mission. Her old eyes filled with tears of joy. "Strange creatures," she whispered to herself. "Beautiful, strange creatures." She closed her eyes and slept, dreaming of a universe filled with kindness. And across 1,000 worlds, Humans and Valanthi and Morvathi and Quelith and so many others looked up at the same stars and believed, perhaps for the first time, that the universe was not cold after all. It was full of people who remembered, and that made all the difference.